Andy Farrell has named his Ireland team for Thursday night's showdown against France, and ahead of what is a daunting trip to Paris, there is plenty to discuss. Will Slattery here with you, delighted to be joined for our chat today by Luke Fitzgerald. Luke, how are you?
Good, Will. How are you?
Doing very well, thanks. Yeah, very excited to see the team news come in today, and we're also delighted to be joined by our man who no guesses where he is from his backdrop, Rúaidhrí O'Connor. How are you? How are you, Rud?
Bonjour. Ça va? Yeah. Very, very wet in Paris today. It's not. It's a day for ducks out there. So yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, awful weather here in Dublin as well. So yeah. It's similar to what the lads had in Portugal last week by the sounds of it. Before we kick off, a reminder that our rugby coverage on the left wing is sponsored by Energia. Energia sponsors rugby in Ireland at all levels at grassroots with the Energia AIL and is official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht and the Irish men's and women's teams. To learn more about Energia's rugby partnerships and find out about their exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. Guys, the team news came out this morning. Lots to discuss. Very interesting team. Obviously, with the injuries, there was going to be a pretty significant amount of change to what we're used to seeing. But there was a few other surprises as well. I'll quickly spin through it and then get your thoughts on it. Starting in the front row, Jeremy Loughman gets the nod at loosehead, obviously missing a couple of guys there. Dan Sheehan at hooker. Thomas Clarkson at tight head. No, Tyg Furlong, he isn't fit enough to play, although Andy Farrell says he should be fit next week. But no place for him on Thursday night. Joe McCarthy and Tyg Byrne second row. Cian Prendergast gets the call at number 6, which I don't think had been forecasted. Say last week when a lot of the previews were being done. Josh van der Fleer and Caelan Doris completes the back row. Gibson Park and Sam Prendergast at half back. McCluskey and Ringrose in the centre. And then the back three also very interesting. Jamie Osborne at full back. Tommy O'Brien on the right wing and Jacob Stockdale getting the call on the left wing. No place for James Lowe in the 23. And then a 6-2 split in the bench. Ronan Kelleher, Michael Milne, Finlay Beelum, James Ryan, Jack Conan, Nick Timoney, and then just Craig Casey and Jack Crowley covering the backs. Rod, obviously you're over in Paris. You would have been talking to Andy Farrell after the team was named. What's kind of your big takeaway from what I read out there? Like a lot of interesting calls, some forced, some unforced. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I think it's not a bad team when you look at it. Like it's probably stronger when you kind of consider the bench. I think the bench is very strong, and if Ireland are still in the game in the last 20 minutes, they've quite a lot of cavalry to come into it. But they're light at front row, and that's I think where the winning of this and losing of this game is going to be. If Jeremy Loughman and Thomas Clarkson can hold their own at scrum time, then Ireland will be in the game, and everything that happens will flow from that, and they would never. Andy Farrell would never have envisaged going into a Six Nations game away in Paris with this front row. This was never part of the plan. Loughman's fourth choice. He hasn't been in the squad since his last cap in 2024, but he's the next man standing. They've lost Porter, they've lost Paddy McCarthy, they've lost Jack Boyle. So it was him or Michael Milne, and ultimately he is probably the bigger man, the more experienced man, and Milne probably offers you a bit more off the bench in terms of his carry and his punch as well. So if you are hanging in there, he's a good option to bring on. Cian Prendergast was the one I think that stands out. It looks like a line-out call to me that they've gone with a kind of a captain of his province, a player who had a very good November off the bench, but he's quite an accomplished line-out forward. I'd say Paul O'Connell has been lobbying hard to get a nice balance of line-out into the pack as well. It makes for a fairly meaty back row. And I think Stockdale over Lowe is a form call. I don't think James Lowe's been playing well enough to be picked. It does worry me a little bit because I think Stockdale has had defensive lapses over the years, and that's probably a big reason why he hasn't been picked for a Six Nations match since 2021. But at the same time, he's playing very well for Ulster, and while he's up against some very good wingers in Adesogbe and BL Beret, he does have a lot of talent and a lot of game-breaking ability, and if Ireland can get him the ball and a bit of time and space, he can cause damage. So as I say, it's not the team Andy Farrell would have ever planned on picking for this game, but he's missing Ryan Baird, he's missing 3 looseheads, he's missing Tyg Furlong, he's missing both of his first and second choice fullback. So he's bringing Jamie Osborne in from the cold, having not played through injury since November. It's a little bit mix and match, and it's a little bit worrying if you're going to Paris on a Thursday night for a Six Nations opener, but it's what he's got, and it's hard to quibble with a lot of it.
Yeah, Luke, obviously we previewed the tournament on last week's episode with Rudd as well, and then we were in the Helix with Ian Madigan, Eddie O'Sullivan, Joe Malloy and Sinead Hassan on Friday, and we kind of did another go around with it. Like, now having seen the team, which moves it on kind of a step further, are you say, more confident going to Paris on Thursday, less confident, the same level of confidence having seen the team that Andy Farrell has been able to put together now?
I'd say similar. Like I would agree with a lot of what Rudd said. I mean, I think the bench looks pretty good. I mean, Timoney's playing great. Conan, Ryan, Beelum, Kelleher, like they'll all provide some serious. They're all Timoney less so, but the rest are very experienced. But Timoney's playing very well. There's a bit of punch there. I quite like that. I mean, look, Casey and Crowley as well. They played together. I mean, that's a nice combo. I mean, I think people are well aware of what my kind of pecking order was, but I think we were all thinking that Prendergast is probably the likely man in Farrell's eyes. And, obviously from an attacking perspective, I think he's quite clear on, him being his number one. And that's kind of been, that's what's getting him in at the moment. And I can kind of see some logic in that, because I think you're not going to be able to defend for too long. Or you will have to defend for long periods, but you can't do it for the whole game against France. You're going to have to put some points on the board. Now, I probably would have gone. I thought maybe the kicking might have got Byrne in there, because he's probably the most accomplished of all three at the moment. He certainly looks the most confident. And I thought that might be the route to getting onto the scoreboard, maybe capitalizing a bit of French discipline, which can happen from time to time. But look, he's gone with Prendergast, and that does mean that, they're going to be trying to score a few tries, I think, which is good. And he's got plenty in that back line to cause them trouble. I mean, McCluskey's playing very well. And I think, Prendergast should be leaning on him quite a bit, and hopefully the team will. Like, if he plays well, he can be a real catalyst for lots of good things for you. So, they could hopefully he's a source of kind of good go forward ball, a bit of momentum for the team. And look, he's got Ringrose next to him as well, which I do think, while there's been some troubles with the Leinster defence, and he hasn't been perfect, he's probably our best, most natural 13 that we've got. So it's good to have him back in there. And look, I know there was a bit of chat about Osborne, not having played, and that's definitely not ideal. But he's kind of come into that fullback position. Yes, with more rugby under his belt, but oftentimes not with rugby at 15 under his belt. So I think that I'm not as concerned about that slot maybe as I would have been. I look, the preference would have been to have had Keenan there, I think, but not by a massive margin. I think Keenan has played like so little rugby. Poor guy just can't catch a break. So I like that Tommy O'Brien's back in there. I mean, I think that's a positive. And yeah, I mean, look, the one thing I would say is, like, you'd probably, if you think about Prendergast and where he's sitting, like, obviously, look, big man, serious athlete. But I did wonder if they would have had a little bit more weight with Conan in there. Now, maybe there's not a massive difference, but Conan just feels a bit weightier to me. And I wonder in the scrum, packing down on Lockman's left arse cheek, would it have been nice to have an extra 5 kilos or whatever? I could be wrong on that number, but it always feels like Conan packs a little bit more punch. And I did wonder if they were going to do something like that, Will, just to try and support them as best they can. But look, I made the point, that I do think you need to survive. You could be under pressure at the scrum and still win a match. I think that's a bit over-egged at the moment, just because South Africa are demolishing teams. But not everyone else is demolishing teams there. And I think, look, you can be on the back foot there and it puts pressure on you. But if your line-out's good, that can kind of offset that. And maybe that's the thinking there, is that they say, well, look, let's go with a really strong line out and see if we can get a little bit of dominance there. And maybe that'll kind of even out the little bit of disparity at scrum time. So, yeah, look, I don't think this is impossible, guys. I think it's a huge ask always going to Paris. Massive ask. Always is. But, like, there is definitely a way to get under this French team's skin to kind of to nullify some of the threat. And if they keep it simple and focus on the big pillars of the game, this is not impossible. That's all I'm saying. I think there's a lot of the defeatist kind of attitude. It's not likely, but I think it's possible for this team to go and win. There's still plenty of quality out in that pitch and experience. So they'll need a huge, huge effort, though. They'll need a huge effort, and they will need to score tries. So, like, maybe if they can hang on, if they can keep Prendergast hidden a certain amount on defense, he gives you the best chance of getting on the scoreboard with a few tries, I think, out of all 310s. So I could see the logic. I probably disagree, but yeah, I'm very excited for it. I really hope they put on a good showing, and probably a good thing to get France in the first match of the competition as well, guys. They won't have, they'll be like every other team, kind of figuring out, how to get momentum, how to sync all the different players from all the different clubs from an attack perspective. You'd expect defensively they'd be able to, get that together a bit more quickly. But from an attack perspective, they might not be as smooth as they will be later in the competition. So there is there's a side to this where it might be better to catch them early in the competition.
Yeah, like Rudd, I'm not sure what the view has been over there after the French team announcement as well. Like, because one thing really stark stat jumped out to me after going through their team, that obviously like a lot was made of Ireland, South Africa in November, but France, South Africa was pretty ugly from a French perspective as well. And there's only 5 survivors from the French starting team that night that are starting again on Thursday. So like there's 10 changes to the starting team, which is pretty stark. The only survivors are Thomas Ramos, Biel Biaré, Marchand, Jalanche and Mikel Guillard. So like Galtier, and a lot was made of his squad selection. But when you see it kind of written down, the actual starting team now that we've gotten to the first game of the tournament, like that's a very intriguing kind of risk he's taken as well. And there's obviously lots of talent, and Dupont coming back as well. He was obviously injured in November too, but that's kind of a little bit of not unknown, but it's kind of one question about France and their favoritism on Thursday night is just that's a significant amount of change, and he's kind of looked to turn the page and start a new era. And I suppose while it looks very promising in terms of how the guys have been playing at club level, it's a fairly new team in terms of cohesion that he's putting forward on Thursday as well.
Yeah, there is quite a sizable Toulouse and Bordeaux streak running through, Toulouse streak running through the pack and out to 9, and then a fairly heavy Bordeaux influence from 10 out to 13, and Biel Biaré as well. So there is some continuity and cohesion there, but from a French point of view, as in playing for France, you're right. Like it's a fairly unproven, untested combination that he's gone for, and he's leaning into the depth of French rugby. He's saying, right, you lads didn't do it for me in November. I'm going to get new lads. And he's better able to do that because he has 14 top quality teams to choose from, and they have to play 16 French qualified players every week. So he has, far more players to play with than Andy Farrell has. So Farrell has had to go to his depth, but more through enforced reasons. I think he would have been more, Mundiaki probably would have been involved, had he been available. All the players that we've already listed that are out would have probably been involved. Whereas, France have left out 2 of the players who captained them in November, as recently as November, plus their record try scorer. So, Flamont's a loss. Ntamack would have been their 10. He's not there. Uini Antonio is obviously a huge loss, and I think his presence hovers over the game in terms of they'll probably use that as an emotional tool to try and play for him, and that could be quite powerful for them. But there's a bit of the unknown about this French team. At the same time, there's enough players we know about who are very, very good, including arguably the greatest ever, who's back against the team against whom he got injured last year. And there's a fair bit of bad blood after that game at the time, even though Dupont said he forgives and forgets. There might be a bit more score settling to be done. There's enough quality there to be fearful. And I think even at the point where Ireland were a much better team than France, Paris was always a difficult game. Even when Ireland were under Joe Schmidt and France were a bit of a rabble, they never had it easy in Paris. Grand Slam 2018, they still needed a drop goal to win it, and like you possibly should never been in that situation given the teams on paper. It always takes something special. It's the hardest place to go in the Six Nations for an Irish team, and you don't want to be doing it. You'd rather be France making changes on your own terms than Ireland making changes on the hoof because players are missing.
Yeah, I get your point about, I suppose the Toulouse Bordeaux guys there, they would obviously play so much with each other at club level. I suppose it's kind of like was it Donald Rumsfeld who said known unknowns? We know what we don't know and we don't know if they'll be able to pitch up as a kind of collective, but we do know that they can play together at their club level. So that will be, it will be interesting. And you'd rather have the hand that maybe Fabien Galtier is playing on Thursday night. Luke, just to go back to the Ireland selection, the Stockdale kind of decision is interesting. It's kind of crazy that this is his first Six Nations start since the England game in 2021, which is that was kind of the first time under Andy Farrell that Ireland looked kind of the real cohesive unit they would become for the next couple of years. He's been waiting almost 5 years to get his chance, which is, it's kind of crazy when you sit back and look at it like that. And it's funny, he used to be a player we talk about a lot in the show when he was in around the team, and he was kind of a bit of a lightning rod then, and he's between injuries and form and how good Lowe has been, he hasn't got an opportunity. But it's a huge night for him now with Lowe's form uncertain to kind of get back in the picture. What are you expecting from him? What do you make of his selection generally?
Yeah, quite liked it. I think he gives you that little bit of aerial. He'll be strong there if you can put some good kick ups. I like that he'll be chasing them. Big man. I I think he's been playing well this season. He looks strong. He's been doing well for Ulster. I think like a huge amount of Lowe's introduction obviously hasn't helped in terms of the not seeing him in an Irish jersey really that frequently since 2021. That's impacted that, but also he's had a terrible run of injuries, so he really hasn't been able to stay fit, and that doesn't help. And like obviously had his struggles defensively as well, which kind of compounded those issues, and he never really got any momentum into his game. So look, it's very pleasing to see him back. I hope he has a big day out and stays fit. I think he could be a big player on the day. He's a lot of belief in himself, particularly with ball in hand. Not afraid to try things, not afraid of the occasion. We obviously know he had that magic year where he set this competition alight from a try scoring perspective. So the occasion isn't going to be too big for him, I don't think, Will. So like that's a comforting thing in a team where you're kind of wondering about a few guys who haven't got that much experience at this level. He's not one I'm worried about from that perspective. That was never a thing for him. He was always able to rise to the occasion. So it's just whether he's got the other bits tidy. He's got a big task defensively against this French team. There's some serious threat out wide. I mean, Ramos maybe not so much with ball in hand, but he's lovely. He's a lovely kicking game. Really brings, he'll bring in Bielbury and he'll bring in a Tsogo. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I hope I did okay there. He'll be able to bring them in with different threats, not just ball handling. That'll certainly be a challenge for Stockdale. So hopefully he's tidied up those parts of his game, and then he can get his hands on the ball and be a threat. I mean, I think one of the big things would be, can himself and McCluskey, like they're big men, can he impose himself on this French team? Can they get some go forward for a pack who are likely going to be under the cosh all day? And if they can help them out there and get them a few extra gain lines, things could change, and makes makes things like kicking better. It makes things, all these make have an impact on the disciplinary side of the game. I'm pleased to see him back. I hope he goes well. And I think he could be a big help to 9 and 10 if he chases the ball really well all day, which he's very capable of doing. And let's not forget, Lowe's kicking has been an important part for this Irish team. They do lean on that. Stockdale's got an excellent long kicking game, so he will be important. And it'll probably be. I would imagine they will go to him a bit. And I would say that, particularly with Bielbury, you've got to be really, really, he's got to have a good day from the boot if they are going to be using, which I suspect they will be using him a bit in that facet. So, bit of pressure on him, but I think he's well able.
Yeah, Ru, what's your perspective on this? I suppose the return to the team. It's been such a long time. It's hard to get your head around that it's been 5 years, and that he only started that first Andy Farrell game. And then obviously, as I said, the former low and how well the team went and his injuries meant that he never got a look in and hasn't really been that close to getting into the starting team, I would say, for a Six Nations game since then, really.
Well, he was first choice fullback for the first, himself and Larmer were the kind of fullbacks before Hugo Keenan emerged onto the scene. So he did get a fair go that first Six Nations, and he had a bad game in Paris when the title was on the line in the 2020 Six Nations in the empty stadium. The night Johnny Sexton complained coming off when Ross Byrne was brought on for him in the last couple of minutes. And he was kind of that, I know he still hung around and got a couple of games, but he lost his central contract in the next year or two. He's had a rough ride. It's been tough on him, but unfortunately, I think he has had too many defensive lapses in green jerseys to be kept around. And he's kind of got back in and he's done well in games against Fiji and Japan, but he seemed to always get injured whenever he got picked for Ireland. He kind of be going well and he'd pick up something, and he has had a couple of different injuries, but we all know what he can give to Ireland. And if you look at that back three, it's a very strong back three from an aerial point of view. The entire back line is very strong from a kicking point of view. I think we're going to see Ireland's best performance in November was against Australia. They kicked for more than 1,000 meters in that game, kicked often, kicked accurately, won the aerial battle. Matt Hansen was brilliant on the night, winning his aerial battles. Osborne's great in the air. My fear with Osborne, a fullback, is does he have the pace if Adesogbe or Bielbury get in behind? But if it's on Ireland's terms, if they're matching up physically, if they're kicking on their own terms, if Prendergast and Gibson Parker are nailing those contestables, can they kind of get dominance over Bielbury, who's brilliant when he gets a bit of time and space, but isn't the biggest man, and he's up against a really aggressive, strong aerial presence in Tommy O'Brien. Adesogbe has been picked for his aerial prowess, so I wouldn't see him as a weakness. But Ramos is a brilliant player. Is he the best aerial fullback in the world? Probably not. He's there for his goal kicking, his creativity. I think, and the forecast is for it to be really wet on Thursday night. So I think Ireland will try and make that French back three, make mistakes, and I think they'll want to play the game as far away from their own goal line as possible. So I think that's a strength Ireland have, because Ringrose is a clever kicker as well. And obviously McCluskey's, it wouldn't be his greatest strength, but he can be the foil. They can give him the ball when they need it, a bit of go forward and then kick off the back of that. So I think that's going to be the route to victory for Ireland. I think is to kick accurately on their own terms, and then win those contestables. Like, lean into the way the game is being played right now. Don't stop moaning about it. Go and win those contestables, and get the scraps on the ground when the ball does go to deck. And if it gets knocked on, don't get mullered at the scrum. Like, that's going to be the key on Thursday night. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think it's going to be a little bit from the Leinster template. This one battle after another season that they're going through. It's hang in there, stay in the fight, and take your chances when they present themselves. Get that French crowd, try and silence that French crowd. We don't know what sort of French crowd it'll be, because there'll be fewer fans up from the south on a Thursday night. It'll be probably a bit more corporate, a bit more Parisian, fewer Irish fans, I'd say. But can you disengage the crowd from the event? Can you get ahead early? Can you take your chances, silence the stadium, make the French doubt and expose that lack of experience that they probably have based on getting rid of Gael Ficou, Pinot, Aldrit, and then bringing on that 6-2 bench and your 4 Lions on the bench and Jack Crowley to offer something different. And this is the ultra kind of, positive, and the way Andy Farrell is probably envisaging it happening in the best case scenario. But Casey and Crowley up the tempo. But they have to win the basic battles first. It has to be based on discipline. It has to be based on a strong set piece, winning the scraps, not making handling errors under no pressure like they have been doing in their kind of bad days out in the last year. And I think one thing that they need really is they need a couple of players who haven't been great this season to step up. And we might be worried about the players who are less experienced, but I think what Ireland need is Tyke Byrne, Dan Sheehan, Caelan Doris, Gary Ringrose, Jemison Gibson Park to get to their levels and produce what we know that got them on the Lions tour, that got them to being one of the best teams in the world. Because if they play the way they've been playing for Leinster and Munster recent times, then it's going to be a long night, because they're not going to be winning those collisions. They're not going to be as accurate as they should be. But Farrell placed a lot of trust in his ability and kind of go to Portugal and get them back up to their levels. If they're at their levels, it'll make the other players, the changes around them, they can then feel comfortable and thrive. But if you're relying on Cian Prendergast, Lockman, Stockdale to make plays, and the other lads are not, kind of world class in the way that we know they can be, then it's going to be really difficult for them.
Yeah, Luke, it reminds me of what Tyke Byrne said after the Lions Test series, when he kind of said Andy Farrell went up to himself and Tom Curry and just kind of pushed a few buttons, and they delivered great performances in that Test series, having kind of in a similar, I suppose, narrative around their performances going into that Test series as there are some guys going into Paris Thursday night, that he was able to kind of get them to the pitch of the Test series, and they were absolutely brilliant. I think we said something similar in November. It's not ideal if you have to go around to 7 or 8 guys and kind of do the same little speeches and kind of pull at different strings to get them going, but that's what's going to be required.
Yeah, I think so. That's a good point Rhodes makes, and look, there is simple ways probably into this game for me, I think, I'll be putting Jalibert under some pressure. I'll be putting Stockdale down, or Stockdale, I'll be putting and McCluskey down his channel. I think there's a chance for some good go forward there. I mean, he makes his tackles, but he's not fearsome in that respect, because they'll be focusing on that for us. But I think we could do the same to them. And I like Rhodes' thinking on the aerial battle. I think Bielbieri and Ramos definitely are they could be shaky. They could get shaken up there. The one thing that probably we haven't mentioned is the Ireland discipline. That is a major factor. It's we were on when we were talking about this last Friday, Will. It was one of the big discussion points that we all had. And we all agreed that that absolutely needs to improve massively. And it could be improved quickly with the refocus there. So I think, with Ramos particularly being on the pitch, we will get punished badly if our discipline is bad. They will ping us around. And then obviously you look at the set piece pressure they could build on us there. That to me is probably one thing that's been unspoken about, but that could really, really hurt the Irish team if they haven't got that fixed by Thursday night. They need to really be focused on that and making sure that if France are going to score, they've got to produce some brilliant rugby in difficult conditions. And that would be how my mindset would be from that perspective. So That is something that I'll be watching closely, as well as obviously, can those guys get to the pitch of the game? I think they need a big one from McCarthy. I was surprised. I was kind of a little bit surprised that a Dogbo's not in there, but I can see why Timothy's there. He's played some great rugby, and he's a quality player, and you might need a fetcher, on the ground. You're going to need someone to slow the ball down for you. But I thought the extra weight might have been helpful, but maybe just a little bit, kind of green at the moment for him. He's, I was listening to Andy Farrell talking about him. I think, he probably needs to get up to the pitch a little bit of international rugby. So not altogether unsurprising, but I did think maybe there was an outside chat, and there had been a bit of chat about that, particularly with the conditions. It could have been helpful to have someone like him in there just to kind of give you that extra bit of graft or grind in there, an extra little bit of weight, particularly for the scrum. So, to me, it's a really interesting battle developing. Can they keep Dupont quiet? To me, that's the key. If you can keep him relatively quiet, bloody hard thing to do. That goes a good way as well to kind of getting close to parity with this French team. I know there's threats all over the pitch, but he is still the key guy. And then you have a few areas where I think, from an attacking perspective, if you're not getting go forward, you can go to the air to those guys. You can get into Jalabert, So I don't think they need to overcomplicate what they're trying to achieve here. And I think, look, when the opportunities are there, just take the obvious options and find. In big games like this, sometimes it's just about finding one thing that you can kind of hang your hat on and keep going after, and then that will open up other opportunities for them. So, it's developing quite nicely. Look, I was probably maybe when I see the team, I'm kind of, because I don't see a Penno or I don't see someone like, it doesn't strike as much fear into me maybe as it normally would, or an Antonio or some of these guys. Do you know that kind of way? When I'm looking at the French team, but maybe when I see them all togged out, I'll be going, oh. I feel like right now I see a chance for us to do it, but slim, but I can see it.
Rod, what was kind of the noises going out of Andy Farrell today? You would have been there, obviously, talking to him. Was there any kind of particular narrative he was trying to push, or anything jumping out about his explanations around some of the selections that you want to share?
I think the red flag from an Irish point of view is probably that he kept talking about how great an experience it's going to be for all the players, which is always a sure sign that there's a bit of unease about what's coming, and that he's not maybe fully convinced that they can go to Paris and win with this team. We have to remember as well, like, France hammered Ireland in last year's Six Nations. Like, this, and that was in Dublin. So there is capacity for this to go horribly wrong, as much as we're making a case of how Ireland might go about it. I think he wants them to be kind of, to approach it with a bullishness, to go after France, to kind of feel as comfortable as they can be, and go and embrace it, and in the kind of typical Andy Farrell way, that he doesn't want them cowed. He wants them to put their puff their chest out and say, like, Ireland have been on par with France over the last 5-6 years under Andy Farrell. As much as Ireland got hammered by France last year, they did a big number on France 2 years ago in Marseille. They went very close in Paris in 2022. They've had the edge, or they've been at least on par with this French team, who are, they've both been part of that top four for a long time. The fear is that they've dropped off, and he knows they've dropped off, and that, understandably, the loss of your first choice tight head and your three best loose heads in a country that doesn't have an awful lot of front row depth is possibly a bridge too far. So he's saying the right things. He's not overly burdening them with pressure and expectation, albeit last week at the Six Nations launch, he did say he expects them to go out and win every game, and he wants them to go after Islam as in the same way they would have last year and the year before. So he's not dropping his standards, but I do think he's maybe couching things in terms of, this will be a great, long-term, our lads will benefit from this and we'll learn a lot. I mean, if they come away with a really good performance, even with a losing bonus point, or maybe even, 2, probably unlikely to score 4 tries in Paris in the conditions, based on the way things are shaping up. But if they come away with something that keeps them alive in the tournament, that's a good night's work. I think, considering all the injuries they have, they just got to be in the fight. He was really proud of the way they stayed in the fight against South Africa. When everything, just like that in the chaos, how they scrambled, and like, they were let off the hook a couple of times by the box, and their decision to scrum again probably made life a little bit easier for Ireland in terms of the scoreboard. But he needs to see more than that. It can't just be scramble. They've got to fire some shots. They've got to show up at set piece. But in terms of what he's saying, I didn't get a sense he's uber confident about this. I think there's an apprehension there. but sometimes maybe that's the best. That could be that hyper realism about what could go wrong, and that fear of what could go wrong could sharpen the mind just the same. That we can't let this get out of hand for us, and we just try and stay in it, and that could be a good thing.
Yeah, Rod, it's funny because like both the preview and our the live show on Friday took fairly decidedly negative turns fairly early on. So I've been trying my best just to let us develop this case and look at the positives. But I just look at the team that's been selected and I say, with the injuries Ireland have, the form the team are in, the recent result against France, the recent results in November, I just don't see the basis for any confidence. I think it would almost be delusional for us to be sitting here saying, "Oh, we're going to Paris." It's not even in the Aviva, on the opening night, and saying, "Oh yeah, we have a really strong chance of winning." I just don't see how.
No one's making that case, are they?
I don't know if I feel like both of you are getting confident. I feel like there's.
No, I'm not confident. It's a 13-point game in the bookies.
When's the last time it's been like that, Rod? I'd say you have to go back 10 years for it, or an All Black, maybe an All Blacks.
I think Carl Brophy on Twitter was saying it, and he keeps track of these things. I think it was the second test against New Zealand in 2016. After 2 weeks after Chicago was the last time Ireland were this big an outsider in
10 years, yeah.
Game. So I think Andy Farrell's teams have earned the right to be considered in the mix for these kind of games. They've gone to New Zealand and won a series. They've won in France in recent times. They've won in Twickenham. They've gone and done brilliant things over the course of the last while. They're a team that's been in decline for the last year and a half, and they have found a couple of players, and now some of those players have gotten injured just at the wrong time. Look, we're a small rugby nation. Ireland has never had a loose head or tight head depth chart that can absorb the kind of injuries that they've succumbed to at the start of this tournament. It's absolutely apocalyptic to lose your first 3 loose heads. That's and it's going to put shine a massive light on the kind of front row depth and RFU strategy. I think it's just 8 of the 9 loose heads in the top 9 are all from Leinster. What's going on in the other 3 provinces? There's lots of bigger picture stuff. But in terms of actually believing Ireland can win the game, I believe Ireland have a shot here, but it's an outside shot. It's a long shot. They need to get everything right. They need players who are out of form to produce something. They need players we've never seen it before, or we haven't seen it for a long time, to have the game of their lives. It's happened before. It can happen again. That's sport. But if you're asking me to predict what's going to happen, I think France are going to get on top physically in the scrum and the line out, and they're going to get the ball out to their 2 quick wingers and through the hands of their unbelievably creative halfbacks in midfield, as well as their best player in the world that they have at scrum half, and they're going to cause carnage. That's what I think is going to happen. But I can see how Ireland can negate all that. I don't think the tight 5 France have picked is particularly special, and that's a way in for Ireland. I don't see Olivon as a second row. I think that's a strange call. If I was a French coach, if I was a coach of any team and I had Emmanuel Mayafu available against Ireland, I'd always pick him. He's the kind of player that always causes Irish teams awful headaches. He'll be there for the last half an hour and he'll cause damage there, but I would have got the maximum out of him. So there's, the problem is, even with the Irish line-out hasn't been good for the last year. I know Leinster's line-out has been tidied up in the last while, so your scrum might be under pressure, but can we rely on the Irish line-out to be good? Not really. The Irish discipline, they're saying they're going to fix their discipline. The last time we saw them play, they conceded 28 penalties, including penalty advantage, and four yellow cards and a red. This could be ugly, but you have to give them a bit of respect for what they've achieved in the last couple of years and say that they could put together a performance, because they have enough players there that they could, but it's a long shot.
Yeah, look, and I really am trying to be deliberately kind of negative and put people in a bad mood ahead of Thursday night. It's just I just don't remember going into a Six Nations game with such little confidence in their ability to produce a result, because as you say, they have earned a lot of respect. They've been one of the top teams in the world for 4 or 5 years, probably going back to maybe 2020 when they went to Twickenham and faced England when Saracens were still really, really good. They were pretty imposing trips back then, and I can't exactly recall what my confidence levels would have been like then, but it probably would have been something similar, because the kind of Toulouse-Bordeaux axis running through this French team looks particularly potent.
Yeah, I think the one maybe parallel is Marseille 2 years ago, because on the back of the World Cup, Sexton retiring, I don't think people were giving Ireland a huge chance going over there, and Joe McCarthy comes out and announces himself to the world. And I think him being back is huge for this Irish team. He's such an important player. I know he coughs up a penalty or two here and there and makes the odd mistake, but I think his physicality, his attitude, he will take the game to France and he will show no fear. And like him being back is huge for Ireland. But yeah, I think like Marseille, no one was giving them much of a chance going over to Marseille 2 years ago, and they produced a performance. It's there, but it's maybe this is going to be the start of something. Like he's been invested heavily in Clarkson, he's invested heavily in Jamie Osborne. Now he needs them. He needs them to show that, to reward what he's invested over the years. Cian Prendergast's been in the squad for a couple of years. Like, he needs to show it as well. So, there's the shape of a team there that Farrell has been kind of working towards. It's just that he's not doing it on his own terms. And like, I just have to keep going back to that loose head slot. I think it's a real worry. And that's there's a reason they haven't picked Jeremy Loughman. He's only got 5 caps at the age of 30. They don't think he's as good as the others. And it's a huge ask for him to go and take on a French pack in Paris. Like, hopefully, he proves that my doubts and other people's doubts wrong, and he has a stormer. And Milne comes on and has a stormer, but you can only go on the evidence that you have, and we've never seen that from him before. He's a decent player for Munster, but Ireland have never really fancied him, so it's a big ask for him to go out there and prove it. But like, I'm sure Farrell and Gary Keegan are in his ear all week, and John Fogarty telling him that they believe in him, that his time is now, that he's earned this. And I mean, if you're in his shoes, if you're in Stuart McCluskey's shoes, if you're in Jacob Stockdale's shoes, Nick Timoney, this is it. If it doesn't go well, this is probably it. Like, this is your chance to nail down an Ireland slot. Like, James Lowe's not getting back in if Jacob Stockdale nails this. So like, there's a huge, if you look at it from a player's point of view, there's a massive opportunity here to go and make yourself a hero and show Andy Farrell that you can do it at this level. So that's the way they're going to be looking at it.
Yeah, because a lot of the injuries, like they're not coming back during this tournament, like Porter, McCarthy, say Ryan Baird, Hugo Keenan, Matt Canson, like none of these guys are going to play a minute of Six Nations rugby. So as you say, the opportunity.
Porter will.
Porter might be back?
Porter will be back, yeah.
Okay.
Furlong.
Oh yeah, and Furlong as well. So that may be a couple of guys. And look, I suppose it's been a long time since Ireland had the underdog tag to this degree. It would have been much more prevalent, say, playing New Zealand before they finally got over the line. I wonder is there anything Andy Farrell can mine from that, in terms of pushing buttons? Like, it isn't often that they go into games these days with such a kind of, massive kind of underdog tag.
Yeah, and look, they will have to kind of try and find something from that, and those teams are always dangerous, So, if they can tap into something there mentally, get off to a fast start, make it uncertain, make it difficult for the French. Their disciplinary record isn't great either. That kind of way. They're not as loose as Ireland's, but they generally will give you. They'll give you stuff that you can. Yeah, if you can manage to put some pressure on, they will make mistakes. They will keep trying to play, and I think they will be sloppy at times if you can make some kind of inroads into them, into their defense. They will give away pens. So, yeah, I mean, they're going to need to find something. They're going to need and they also need to change the there's a. I'm going to say the narrative. That's not really that important to them, but the energy levels around the team, the ideas, the clarity around the pitch. It's not just going to be, can they mentally pitch up for this game? I think they can do that. I think they can find something in the underdog. Jesus Christ, excuse me, underdog tag. Will I think Irish teams have always been good at finding something in that, but it's whether they can deliver on the game plan. And my sense is, I just hope they don't overcomplicate. I don't think this is one of those days. I think this is a day to really, really focus on the fundamentals and have very clear and simple strategies around what you're going to target on the opposition. And I think if they can marry all those three things, I think they could put it up to this French team. Like that's a lot of changes from in that French team as well, guys. I mean, this is not. I don't expect this to go unbelievably smoothly for them. And I agree with you on, say, the likes of a Meafu and it's not an unbelievably fearsome French pack. There's a few French packs over a couple of years where you're going, oof, they are, there's weight there, there's real power. That is there, but it's not to the same extent as for a couple of years there, particularly in the World Cup, I was thinking, ooh, that is a big, meaty French pack. If they got on top, it's very hard for us to stop them. They're good, but I'm not unbelievably fearsome. And we've actually got, bar the two guys at prop, and I actually quite like Clarkson, if I'm being quite honest. Every time I see him, he looks muscly around the pitch. He's a good carrier, decent defender. I think there's still the guts of a very strong pack there. I know Prendergast is obviously a little bit, new to this kind of level, but there's lots of experience around him, and he's a good athlete. So I think they can compete there, Will. And I do think, like that point I was making about the line out, that takes on extra importance to me, given what the situation with the props. And I think Prendergast is kind of a nice selection off the back of that. And it's still good. The bench is still good. The bench is still good.
Confidence is building. I can hear it in your voice.
Talking
yourself into it.
It's low probability, but I'm basing a little bit of that off what's on the French pitch as well, Will. And if they can, like, they're aware of the disciplinary issues now. So that's a focus. So if they can get that right, that's one thing that'll be better. I expect them to be better at. I mean, if they've talked all about and they hear all the chat around it, I mean, probably impossible to miss. But it's been hanging around the provinces as well. It's not just a residual thing from November, because I think there was a little bit of a freaky kind of dynamic to that, which is how the scrum played out that day. Even though I would argue that there was a few sloppy parts in that game too, from the 2-10s. But I think the narrative has followed the provinces around too. So to me, that's the first thing I'll be focusing on. And then it's really, really simple from there on in and targeted, try and hang on to the ball. He's picked Prendergast. So, maybe they will be able to pick them apart a little bit with ball in hand. And I think that's going to be a key thing if they want to keep it tight. They'll have to score some tries here. I really believe that. I think if you want to go to Paris and win, you got to score a try or two at least. You got to compete with them, because I think there will be periods where, with all the quality they have in the backs, they might slice and dice you at one point, so you'll need to score for yourself. But yeah, no, it's I don't know. I'm trying to fight this. I'm talking myself into a confident position, but I kind of am. I don't think I wouldn't say it's nowhere near. It's more the 20%, 30% column, but I do think it's possible. I do.
Yeah, well, look, it's set up nicely for sure. Now that we have the teams in particular and have a much more fleshed out idea of what Thursday night might look like. Rod, let's take a step away from the Ireland-France game for a second to the tournament as a whole. Like, coming into this, like, what kind of Six Nations do you envisage? Like, is this a tournament that you think is going to be a high quality one? In the teams that are going to be competing outside of the two we've been discussing at length, like, what's kind of catching your eye away from Ireland and France?
Well, I think everyone's looking at England and the fact that they're coming in on an 11-game unbeaten run, and there's a lot of confidence in English rugby, and they think they can go and do something here. I see them getting tipped for a Grand Slam in their own press. I think, I think I may have said it last week. Like, they're the main benefit. The big thing that they had going for them last November is, well, they didn't have to play South Africa, whereas everyone else did, and it's ended the career of a couple of French greats, and it's really damaged Ireland having to go through that experience. So, I wonder about England's ability to back up what they did last year. I think, if Ireland can go there, in a strong position in 2 weeks' time, I think they could really put it up to them in Twickenham. And I think going to Paris on the final day is going to be a big ask for this English team. So are they as good as everyone says they are? Is it like even the soundings from the Girona camp are very, very positive? Borthwick seems to be on really solid ground now. They're like, I think they're the ones with the biggest expectations on their shoulders, and it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. I think Wales are going to struggle, but maybe will make life difficult. I think, Scotland are in such a weird place, and that Glasgow are going well, but Townsend's under huge pressure after after what happened in November with the New Zealand game and the Argentina game. So, that's a big question over them and what they're going to bring to the table, and like they're under huge pressure to get into the top three. And if they don't pick off Ireland on the final day, that's going to be huge pressure on Gregor Townsend and whether he makes it through to 2027, because he's taken on that consultancy role with Newcastle Red Bull, and they're not happy about it in Scotland. So, and then the Italians, like Rassie Erasmus is predicting the Italians are going to get into the top three during November. So, they've had a good year. Like they came very close to beating Ireland in Rome last year, and I think that's a dangerous fixture for Ireland next week. And I think they've got England and is it England and Scotland and Rome, so that they've, like, Italy could be a big threat to teams. I think they've been coming up a level for the last couple of years. So yeah, I think it's going to be competitive. I don't know how high quality it is, and I don't know where Ireland fall into that kind of hierarchy now. I think we've probably have more uncertainty around Ireland than we have done for 4 or 5 Six Nations. it's always the opening weekend just ruins someone's dreams and kind of there's always a good punch for someone. And by Sunday, we'll have a much clearer picture of where we're at. But I still think the top three is the top three. I can't see Ireland dropping out of it. I don't see Scotland getting above them. And yeah, I think France are probably a bit stronger than England. I think it'll probably be possibly France, England, Ireland by the end of it.
Luke, what's your view on where Scotland are at? Obviously we kind of have a bit of fun sometimes with them talking themselves up or whatever, and Ireland's record against them. But as Rud said, like, Glasgow have been looking really, really good. Like, they beat Toulouse, in the Champions Cup, and there's going to be a lot of Scotland players from that Glasgow side and a lot of Toulouse players as well. So, like, that's a decent barometer, you'd think, of where Glasgow and maybe Scotland are at, albeit, as Rud mentioned, November had some really, really disappointing results. And their fixture list is actually pretty good. Like, they start with Italy, then they have England at home, then I think it's Wales away, break week, France at home. So they could, if they can get a big scalp in round 2, all of a sudden they could be really getting momentum come a break week. Like, would you give them any chance of finally converting the promise into, like, taking some serious scalps and, like, either challenging for the title properly or even going to Dublin at the end? And, like, I think they've lost 11 in a row to Ireland going back to 2017 when Vern Cotter was still the coach. So it's been a long era of dominance from Ireland. But any chance that this is the year Scotland finally kind of put it together?
I don't think they can put it all together. I do think they'll have a big surprise in their locker. And I don't think it's going to be us at home. I don't think that. I think it'll be someone. I think it'll be one of the other teams, to be honest with you. At home, they'll have one big surprise in them, will be my view. I don't think they'll get three scalps from the three, what I would say, the established top three for the last while. Although maybe England are kind of more newer into that top three, I suppose. But the top three, as Rud's kind of has described it at the moment, based on form, I still think they're slightly outside that. I think Ireland have a better pack than them. And I know, look, if they get Furlong back next week, and you'd hope you might get Porter back for that game against them. I do think we'll have a little bit too much for them. Even with kind of our 10 situation maybe being a little less certain, certainly in most people's minds outside of Farrell's, even kind of carrying that and maybe some of the other long-term injuries, I still think we have a little bit too much for them at home. Although for whatever reason, Twickenham doesn't seem to be a problem for them. They seem to be able to put in a big performance there. So it's a very funky scorelines. But I could see them taking a scalp, yeah. England's the most likely, agreed. But I don't see them like going far consistently in the competition. I think consistency is still going to be what escapes them. If you think about the New Zealand game as well, November, I mean, they still find a way sometimes to lose from kind of weird scenarios, So, yeah, I find it hard to trust them to deliver something consistently, but I know they have a big one in them.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not us.
Yeah, that would be my read of it as well. The round 2 game, Scotland-England, is teed up really nicely, Rud. Like, that's kind of a clash of two people really talking themselves up at the moment. Like, the talking up in England is out of control. It really is. Like, I read an article today, obviously the team was named yesterday, and like, article in the Telegraph praising Steve Borthwick as this gutsy, visionary selector who takes risks. And I'm like, are we talking about the same person? I'm like, what's going on? I just feel like the Kool-Aid being drank about England at the moment. Like, their record really doesn't stand up to scrutiny in that winning streak. Like, what just predates the winning streak is Ireland beating them in the Aviva. Like, I don't know if people remember, like, Scotland were one conversion away from beating them at Twickenham again last year. Like, if Duhan van der Merwe hadn't have ran into the corner, if he had cut back inside a little more, Finn Russell could easily have kicked that winning conversion. As you said, they didn't play South Africa, so like they had a big win over New Zealand, and that's and a fortuitous win over France. And I do think they have potential, but like, their fixture list isn't easy at all. They have to go to France, they have to go to Scotland. Even Ireland round 3 with a few bodies, as you mentioned earlier, back on deck will be tough. So I'm very much taking a wait and see approach with England. I do think they're as good as they do.
I think they're on a good trajectory, but I don't think they're there yet. And I think that this could be a Six Nations that just, they might hit a speed bump. I think by the time they get to the World Cup, they'll have a very good team. I think that, like, some of their players were really excellent on the lines, and were probably the line's best players. Like, you think of Ellis Genge was superb, Tom Curry was outstanding, Itoje is always very good, albeit, like, he's just lost his mum, so he's going to have a difficult few weeks, and that could be a struggle for him. But again, they could rally around that. They've a very good set piece. They've got big bodies. They've kind of got midfield depth for the first time. They've got a lot of really good flankers. They've obviously got some really exciting young players like Pollock coming off the bench. But you got to put these players in a position they haven't been in before, and you got to kind of make life uncomfortable for them. And Scotland, have repeated. Like if they go to Murrayfield, if they hammer Wales this weekend and then go to Murrayfield and win well, or even win, because that's been a really problematic fixture for them. They're going to be in great form going to Twickenham to play Ireland. And we don't know what shape Ireland will be in by then, because it depends on how Thursday goes. So there's a lot. It's hard to predict it, but they look like they're moving in the right direction. But I think they've got a few things to prove before we anoint them champions in waiting. And certainly, like going to Paris at a 9 o'clock local kickoff time on a Saturday night to go and win a championship will be a massive test. And if they do go and win this championship or even slam, then you're talking about a really serious team and a World Cup contender. But we got to see it from them first. I wouldn't go anointing them just yet.
That would be my view. I think if they get to Paris with 4 from 4, then no matter what happens in Paris, I will tip my hat and say this is a serious team. I agree with you. Like they need to be winning the first 3 games before the break week if they're as good as they say they are, or think they are, or the media have been writing that they are. And I do agree they have potential. So that's why I'm actually very intrigued to see if they can convert it. Anything else, Luke? Any other Six Nations storylines before we kind of go to wrap up that are catching your eye from any of the teams, or even like there was a lot of talk about the style of play in rugby generally after November, like and whether that was something that was, I suppose, that kind of enjoyable for like neutrals or kind of floating rugby fans to watch, even like anything like that catching your eye.
Not particularly. I'm kind of just excited for it to start at this stage, and there's lots of. I think we're a little bit less sure about some of the established names that we, like, so Ireland are very much kind of a team where we're still making our minds up whether they can get this thing to the World Cup, and are people, at the very crest, or is there still a little bit more they can get out of these players? So that's interesting to watch. Scotland, I still think we're in the same position we've always been. That hasn't changed for me. England are probably the most exciting ones to see. Like, sorry, I say exciting. Maybe the most unknown quantity in terms of how far along they are. France is kind of, I'm wondering, is there a bit of a regression back to some fairly odd coaching decisions? I think the Pinot one is kind of an interesting one to me. It doesn't look like his powers have waned, but he's not in, and he's their top try scorer. That's a bit unusual, I think. And yeah, I just thought there was a few kind of unusual things. Like that's a lot of changes to make from November for a team that's pretty good, like South Africa seem to be able to do that to teams. They just seem to be able to create that serious uncertainty in what you've been doing. It's obviously because they beat the crap out of you, but it's just, I just don't think they're such a different test to whatever else you face, that I just wonder, have they panicked a little bit and kind of changed up the team a little bit too much from that, yeah, no, I think it's more, to be honest with you, we're just excited for the competition. I think it's interesting to bring up the thing about the game. I mean, to me, there's still plenty. Like, the first couple of weeks in this competition, probably dealing with a bit more weather concerns, and it's been pretty crap over here, and it sounds like it hasn't been great everywhere else either. Like, will that impact the quality of the games, and does that feed into that narrative? It may well do, but the start of the competition is always tricky to deliver really fantastic performances anyway. I think it's always a bit more of an arm wrestle, whereas later in the competition, the weather gets a little bit better, you're playing together for a little bit longer. Obviously, the competition is a bit more condensed. That's probably an interesting thing to watch, as well as the kind of quality of the games and all that chat. I mean, what impact will 3 in a row have on guys? That is big, because it takes, these games are really hard on the body. So we could see some teams kind of change fairly dramatically week to week if you got 3 kind of fairly tough tests. Will the body stand up to that? And to me, I think it might be a good thing for Ireland to have to test themselves out, particularly for a World Cup. With that in mind, I think this could be a good thing that you have to got to back it up kind of fairly regularly. So they're the kind of dynamics maybe that I'm watching outside of the rugby, and some of the things that I'm thinking have changed this year, or in the or the rugby community are talking about, that maybe will be interesting to see. But to be honest with you, I'm more excited for the competition. I don't think it's a cert. France are definitely the strongest, I think, on paper. But as I said, I mean, it's a little bit feels a little unsettled there with some of those, some of the people not in the camp, and I'm kind of wondering, as I said, is there a bit of a regression to some unusual coaching stuff, which I thought they'd kind of got rid of that. Do you know what I mean? I thought that was kind of out of the game there. It was a bit more stable. So fascinating. Lots of fascinating little subplots, isn't there?
I agree with you, though. I'm just looking at the French team. I have it written down on the sheet in front of me, and if you had like Penaud there and Aldred there, I would definitely have more kind of sense of doom.
Yeah.
I do agree with you. Obviously, Galtier knows those guys very, very well and has made that decision. But certainly from the outside looking in, I still think it's very strange. And I think they might come to regret it. Last thing, Rud, before we wrap up, and it's looking far into the future, but I know that the 2027 Rugby World Cup schedule has been announced, and you were writing about that from an Irish perspective. But I just want to read out to people the opening weekend of fixtures. Obviously, it's been extended from 20 to 24 teams. And this is what we have on the Friday, Saturday and Sunday now. I know it's the goods are 2 years away, but this is what we're going to be watching the first weekend of the World Cup. Australia versus Hong Kong, Wales versus Zimbabwe, New Zealand versus Chile, France versus America, England versus Tonga, Japan versus Samoa, South Africa versus Australia, Scotland, Uruguay, and Georgia versus Romania.
South Africa aren't playing Australia, are they?
Did I say Australia? I meant to say Italy. God, no, sorry, that would have been a lot better. South Africa versus Italy, Scotland versus Uruguay, and Georgia versus Romania. Like, what on earth is that, Rud? Like, as a global showpiece kicking things off, that is ridiculous.
They've kind of missed the boat, haven't they, with the New Zealand Australia game? I think that really should have been the first game in Perth on the 1st of October. Just launch the tournament. I think Australia had the option of playing that, and obviously Joe Schmidt or Les Kiss or whoever's making that decision has decided they'd rather have a game under their belt to kind of get off winning ways before they face the All Blacks. Like, this is the price you pay for an expanded tournament. It's a bit like the Champions Cup. They're kind of sacrificing the pool stage to go and to kind of have a better knockouts and to have, around the 16. It's a shorter tournament as a result, perverse as that sounds, it'll be run off in one fewer weekend. They obviously, it's a long way off, but Ireland will have a bit of a tricky, they play Portugal in the first game, which should be an easy win, but then that's on a Monday, and then they play Scotland in their all-important game the following Sunday, and they have to fly to Perth, which is a 5-hour flight. So that's basically a day wasted or a day lost. So that's going to make life a bit tricky. Look, we have a lot of time to discuss it, but it's not going to kick off. It's not going to be a front-loaded opening weekend. People aren't going to be getting up at the middle of the night to watch them. But I suppose the payoff will be come the knockouts. But even with around 16, there's going to be some turkeys as well.
They should have mandated Australia, New Zealand had to start. As you say, Friday, October 1st, Australia and New Zealand would have made it appointment viewing. To start off with Australia, Hong Kong is just a joke. Like, that's going to be like, an 80-0, 90-0 job. And as you say, it doesn't get much better when you get the Wales, Zimbabwe at 3:45 a.m. Irish time.
Yeah, one of the Ireland games is at 5 a.m. as well, isn't it? So like that's going to be tricky. But this does sound like a 2027 problem. I did want to mention the A game on Friday night. There's going to be, I said there's players playing in that game on Friday in Thomond Park who may end up playing in the Six Nations by the end of it. And Matty Devine is involved in that, and that's quite a big talking point amongst Connacht fans that he's gone to Ulster. He turned down a Galway native, turned down a contract with Connacht to move to Ulster on a 1-year deal. It doesn't sound like that's been handled particularly well, and I don't think the fans are too happy about it. So maybe we'll revisit that down the line. But he's a player of huge promise who doesn't seem to get a look in from his coaches. I'd love to see him get a run on Friday, and hopefully that's Brian Gleeson or apparently the Ireland coaches were very impressed with Bryn Ward. JJ Kenny and Zach Ward are probably on the wings in that game. Hopefully there's something there, because last year's A game was a complete write-off. I was at it in Bristol. They had a load of concussions. England got on top of them. Like, hopefully a few people step up in that game and add to what Andy Farrell's kind of options as we go into the Six Nations. It's kind of off the beaten track, but that'll be a big game for a lot of players to try and kind of just put their hand forward. And I think the more of those 8 games, the better.
Yeah, certainly more relevant than the 2027 Rugby World Cup schedule for sure. I just wanted to mention that opening weekend because it was so jarring when I read it earlier. Big thanks to Rud over in Paris and to Luke for joining me on this week's episode of the Left Wing Podcast, sponsored by Energia. We will be back on Friday, though, myself and Luke, chatting through all the things that go on in Paris on Thursday night. And Rud, Sinead and Keane will also have a podcast in your feed after that game as well. So we will have you covered every which way. Big thanks to the guys. We will be back with you later in the week. Until then, thanks so much for listening and goodbye.